Et justement, on va enchaîner avec cette deuxième table ronde, le sport comme vecteur pour l'égalité des sexes. Jingle. L'augmentation de la participation des femmes dans les programmes de paix par le sport, ainsi que dans les compétitions et leurs professions sportives, a un impact direct sur la construction des sociétés plus inclusives. Cette succession d'échanges bilatéraux établira comme le sport peut aider à corriger les inégalités, combattre les préjudices et les stéréotypes de genre. Et donc ça va être extrêmement intéressant puisque sur cette session, nous allons avoir une modératrice qui va nous rejoindre. Il s'agit d'une membre du comité égalité dans le sport ENGSO, Madame Jennifer Browning. Sous vos applaudissements, qui va nous rejoindre dans quelques instants. Si on peut l'aider, Jennifer. Merci d'être avec nous. C'est elle qui va conduire cette table ronde. Elle sera accompagnée de Madame Shaima Saleh Al-Husseini, directrice générale de Saudi Sports for All. Welcome, bienvenue. Victor Pataco, président de Portuguese Institute for Sport and Youth. Thank you. Et Félicité Ouemarica, présidente et fondatrice d'Aquos. Merci d'être avec nous. Thank you very much for joining us. Voilà, c'est un vrai plaisir, un honneur également que d'accueillir justement pour cette session particulière. Ici, Son Altesse Royale, le Prince Khaled bin Al-Walid, président de Saudi Sports for All. Merci d'être avec nous. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Hi, thank you, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Jen Browning, and I am a former Paralympic athlete, and my day job is I work for UK Sport, but I'm here today in my role in the Equality Within Sport Committee of ENGSO, which is a European sports NGO. And our topic today is to talk about gender equality. And before we get into our incredible panel of speakers that we've got here to share their insights, I just want to say a few words because I think often we talk about gender equality and people pay lip service to it. You know, they'll say, oh yeah, it's important that we include women. But then we don't see behind it the investment and the commitment and the real recognition of the fact that if we don't take into account the needs of 50% of the population, we're not going to achieve our goals. We're not going to achieve the kind of change we want to see in society if women aren't at the center of the programs that we're designing. So today we're going to look at 3 themes. So we're going to explore, I mean, we could spend all day. We could talk about this for hours. I'd love to, but I've only got 45 minutes. So we're going to explore three themes. We're going to start off looking at the gender gap and what we need to do to achieve mass participation of women, particularly, you know, in a post-COVID world and with a cost of living crisis in many parts of the world. We see that women are affected disproportionately by that. So how are we going to get more women participating? We're going to look at the role of public policy and male allies and the role that, or the importance of top-down leadership if we want to see change. And finally, we're going to look at safe spaces and the importance of sport in communities affected by conflict, and particularly for women in those communities and the change that we would like to see. So I'm going to start with Shaima. So Shaima, if you can just start us off by telling us about some of the work you've done in Saudi Arabia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here. It's a pleasure to be among panelists who are advocating for gender equality globally. So in the Saudi Sports for All Federation, we aim to have increase in physical activity in Saudi Arabia, and we work a lot on the livability and wellness aspect and how to have a healthier, happier community, because we really believe in the impact of sports, not just on an elite level, but also on a community level. In terms of gender equality, we focus on 4 main key areas. The first area would be policy change. So we focus a lot on doing things top-bottom to ensure that there's a woman's voice in terms of sports. So one of the examples is having a female board member in each federation, or at least a female in a committee under the board, to ensure that there's a female voice within each federation to ensure their needs are met, and any obstacles that females are facing within that sport are also considered in boards' directions and decisions that are being made. The second thing that we focus on, and something that Jen also highlighted, which is creating safe spaces. So we also focus on creating a safe space or environment for women to be physically active, whether it's creating locations, safeguarding, also creating talent in terms of coaching, instructors, female referees. This increased the GDP as well, but it also gives females the opportunity or option to work with other female coaches in order for them to be in a comfortable, safe space. The third thing that we focus on is cultural barriers. So in Saudi, not only do we want the community to be physically active, but we want to be physically active without breaking any cultural or social norms. And this is something that I'm happy to say that not only something that we in Saudi worked on, but also global corporations worked on. So for example, we have the Nike hijab, which is worn by one of the US Olympic players, the Adidas modest swimwear. All these things helped increase physical activity in Saudi, where women were comfortable being physically active in a very modest sportswear that doesn't enhance, isn't an obstacle on their performance. The third thing is that we focused on as well to close the gender gap in Saudi when it comes to female participation in sports is creating programs for females. So we're very data centric. So we're very evidence-based, human-centric. So in order for us to create programs, we always listen to the community. What are they looking for? What do they want? And from our data and insight, for example, we realized that 73% of females in Saudi prefer to work out at home. So we created all these programs for them to be physically active at home. Also, we created some digital programs for females to be physically active where we can cover all 13 regions in the kingdom. So we try to modernize our programs in the kingdom. Basically, when we, and another thing is, there are things that were not accepted when we first started in Saudi, so we try to enhance it with a positive aspect. So for example, when we introduced female football, we introduced it linking it with UN SDGs. So in order for you to be able to play football, you need to support the UN SDGs. And because this was a very positive aspect for the parents in Saudi, they were very happy that their girls were participating in such a good cause. So there are a lot of, I can keep going on and on, there's a lot of things that we focused on in the kingdom, but most importantly, we did things that fit the Saudi society, because in the end, you want to ensure that you're doing things in the right pace, in the right time, that the community accepts and believes in order for the full nation to believe in this initiative and move forward going on.
That's great. And what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
So, of course, there's continuous challenges, and there's challenges that we overcame. But I would divide them, we always call them the 3 A's, which is awareness, accessibility, and accessibility, it's not just for females and males, and proximity and affordability. So these are the things that I would say are continuous challenges as well. So when it comes to awareness, we try to raise the awareness of community sports in the kingdom. And sports, it's not just if you want to be an elite athlete or if you want to lose weight for the summer. It's not time-based or goal-driven. It's a way of life. And that's what we try to promote in the community. And for us to promote that, female sports was a very important trigger, because not only are females 50% of the Saudi population, but 75% of the Saudi population are youth. And females are the influencers, they're the mothers, and they're the ones who get the 75% active. So for us, it was a very important targeted audience that we focused on. In terms of affordability, this is something we're continuously struggling with, because sports tends to be a luxury sometimes when it comes to the prices that we see in terms of gyms, sports clothing, and so on. So what we do in SFA is we create other opportunities. So we turn some schools to neighborhood clubs, which is like a YMCA model, which we use after school hours. We activated public parks. In the summer, when it's very hot, we use even malls, shopping malls, where people can walk, and we created a track inside. So this is one of the things that we face as a challenge, but we're trying to overcome. The last thing that we focus on also is a proximity, because one of the biggest barriers or obstacles that we get from our data and insight is that because women are also mothers, and now most women are full-time employees, to have a place near their houses, it's very important. So we try also as much as possible to create a proximity.
That's great. And can I just ask then, what's been the impact? You know, so it sounds like you've had enormous success with this. So, you know, because of this greater participation of women, you know, what kind of changes have you seen?
So in 2019, 24% of the females were active, and now 35% of the females active. And since the last 5 years, female participation in Saudi Arabia increased 170%.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to move on just because we don't have a lot of time to Vitor. Vitor, I guess I want to start off just by asking, you know, what's the current situation in Portugal?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure. I need to start to say that Portugal, as a recent story, is a young democracy, because 48 years ago, he came out from a dictatorial regime. And in that time, for instance, women, they need to ask to her husbands or her fathers to travel or to get a driver's license. Of course, those times are long gone, and nowadays women do not have any kind of social limitation. However, sports in Portugal is male-dominated, and we are, in the last decade, we are trying to change that. But in terms of participation in sports organization, women represent only 30% of the participants in organized sport. Well, we also find in our society inequality in salaries, reduced presence in leadership roles, a lack of media coverage of women's sports, and for instance, we have 60 federations, sports federations. We have, well, about 14% of women in the boards, but we have only 2 women as president of federations, of Portuguese federations. So we think this is a very problem. About the coaches, we have only, in 5, we have only 1 woman in high performance sport. So it's kind of 20%. So we think we have a long way to do about this thing. Even the European Institute of Gender Equality reveals that only about 16% of women are in the board members. But when we goes down to the administrative levels, we find out that both sexes are equally represented. So we need to do something to put women in the leadership roles, we think.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So what is the role of your organization, IPDJ, and the Portuguese government? What comes next to try and address these challenges?
Well, first of all, in the public institutions, it's mandatory that we have parity or equality or equity in women and men. For instance, on my board of directors, we are 4, so we are 2 men and 2 women. For the sport organizations, we don't have that, but now the government are thinking, because we are changing some legislation, we are thinking in sports societies to mandatory that the boards have the obligation to have that parity also. So we know that changing mentalities is a cross-generation path. So we know that this takes time, but I think all the male that are in leadership roles, they need to create the pathways to get the opportunity to women to get in that places. Recognizing, of course, because we have some good examples in our country, recognize that women can do a very nice job, like all the males do, of course.
Yeah, and what would you say to male leaders, so maybe presidents or CEOs or people who can make decisions? What would you say to them if they're not yet an ally in this movement?
Well, what I do as a male leader is to create opportunities. I have many women in leadership positions on the board and also in the medium. So what we can do is create that pathway to get the opportunities. Not only for we are facing a woman, but because for a balanced society, it is very important we have equity and gender equity in all levels of society, and of course in sport also.
That's great, thank you. And now I'm going to come to Felicite. Can you start us off just by telling us a little bit about your incredible personal story and how you came to found Aguas?
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here. This is an exciting moment for us to speak about sports, speak about gender equality, because it has been my dream ever. So, about my life, to have a long story. I don't know how I can just make it short, but I'm going to try. I'm someone who was born during the refugee status, because Rwanda's first mass killing took place in 1959, whereby our parents flew from Rwanda, and we lived in so many countries as refugees. So within that time, my father was a sportsman. He really loved sport. He used to play football, and also had the urge of loving sports so much. But I was not given the opportunity to play. Being a woman, being a girl, I was not supposed to play, because with our culture, it is believed that a Rwandan woman is just to sing and dance. That was that. So I grew up with that thing, that pain of not having a chance of participating in sports, but I had no alternative. So I got married, had children. We are still in the refugee. But I had that thing in mind, the pain that I had because of not participating in sports. So when we came back to Rwanda in 1994, after the genocide against the Tutsi, the priority for the government was to support women initiative in whatever they were trying to do. So as I had started so many businesses in Uganda, I decided to start a beauty salon. With this beauty salon, this was 1994, it was like a safe space for women who are coming in to do their hair, they come to do their makeup, and after some time, another woman comes and you see that they are so emotional, says, "You are still alive? I thought you were dead." So they start now talking. No, me, I'm alive, but my husband was killed, my children were killed. So you could see that there's now emotion that were taking place as they come together. Now they forget about the hair, they forget about whatever, then they sit together and start talking. So after I realized this for a very long time, this thing happening, I said, no, I need to look for something that can unite these women. They get a free space to speak, and then they talk of their issues and then find solution. So this is how I said now I'm going to begin sports with women. It was not easy to tell like parents to send in their girls to do sports. They said, at least if you have that idea, let us start with basketball or volleyball because they are using hands. That one can be workable. But with foot, a Rwandan woman to raise a foot to play, that one would be impossible. I say, I'm going to focus on that because I want to create change. And then I'll bring these women together. So this is when I started I founded an organization that empowers women through sports. So with that was so very much important. The power of sports for peace, the power of sports for conflict resolution, and the power of sports for peace building. You can imagine these people who took part in genocide, they always live by shame, and they feel they are not fit to be in the community. And he is the woman who is having that pain of her relatives and his relatives that were killed during the genocide. So how can they meet together to unite? How could they meet together for reconciliation? This was a very good safe space for them to do football. So you bring them together in football. As we all believe that football or sports in general is a unifier. They come in one team, they're all Rwandans. They are not any ethnic group, they are all called Rwandans. Now, that when they're in the game, because they're trying to fight to win, they don't want any other team member to have issues. So they are together, they are fighting for her to make sure that at least she passes the ball and they win. With that unity, with that, fighting for each other, then they have time to talk about those issues and then they get solution. They decide to say that now, let's take lead to become the champions of peace. Let's take lead to go and bring other women who still have some issues to come together and see how we can develop our country. So I've seen the impact in this. I've seen how women's mindset was changed because all these issues happened because of misinformation. So with this organization, we use sports, any sport, just as a tool to bring in different people of different groups to come together and play. And during the resting time, then we talk about other issues, about women's rights, about gender-based violence. And with that, we partner with different institutions that have that expertise. For us, we organize a tournament and we give it a theme, Women's Right for Peace. And then we bring people who have, that expertise, they come and give a talk. We said about human rights. We bring women who have expertise about gender equality, they come and give a talk. Then we talk also about genocide ideology. Why did it happen? What were the causes? And what are we going to do to make sure that it doesn't happen again? Women have the leading role. Because we believe that if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. Once a woman is educated, once a woman has understood her right, then it is easy to sensitize the community, it's easy to sensitize the family, and there will be change of the mind. So it has really worked for us, and we have seen that we should not forget using sports for peace. And if you follow Rwanda, we have this Kigali International Marathon that is accredited. It is the only accredited by the world with the theme of peace, to use peace. So sports has played a very big role to unite people, reconciliation, and especially among women. Thank you.
Oh, it's amazing. When we were talking yesterday, you told me that when you first started talking about this, people didn't understand. They didn't see, women, sport, how is this going to work? I mean, how did you... What lessons could you share with others about how you kind of overcome that initial skepticism that people sometimes face?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very good question. When you are trying to bring change, you always miss constraints. So for the first year when you're trying to mobilize women to do sports, they used to say, this is after genocide against the Tutsi. Maybe this woman has a mental issue. You better talk to her. I said, because this is unbelievable. How do women in Rwanda start kicking the ball? I think she has some issues. Just they call names. Can you look at this woman? Is she educated? Does she have a family? How dare she think of this? So it was, at least for the first years, it was so terrible. It was so frustrating. Sometimes I could reach a place where I start crying because I have that passion. Something is pushing me, and people don't understand this. Then sometimes I ask myself, why did I have to go into this? But because once you have passion, you don't stop. Then we go back. Sometimes you could open some offices and they say, now that woman has come to talk about women football. I think she's crazy. Just close the door. Tomorrow I go back. So wherever you have passion, you have to be determined, be patient, and then you'll see things coming out. So for now, I say I no longer go to knock to people's door. Instead, they come looking for me. And the language that I used that time when people were laughing at it, it's now the language that they are using for the country's, development.
And I think you've got some incredible lessons for us. I mean, when we look at some of the conflicts going on around the world, what kind of lessons or advice would you give to people who will need to design the programs to support the women affected by those conflicts? What advice would you give?
Yeah, conflicts are all over, and we have this climate change issue. I think what I would advise is to make sure that they put women at the front. They give them all the information, and they support them for all the ideas. Because once they are well educated, once they have increased their capacity, they can always even develop like cooperatives, income-generating activities, even after the disaster. Because we have seen our women in different cooperatives, they are economically empowered. And once people are empowered, then there is peace. Because if people are poor, they always fight for no good reason. But once you are empowered, you do your business, you put yourself into different cooperatives, and then you become role models, you become the champions of peace, and then you are role models to other women. We have had the impact. We now have national women coaches. We now have instructors who are women now. We have different clubs, first division, second division, and in schools also, girls are now they are accepted to play. But that time, it wasn't there. So there has been system change just because we have to raise a voice. So I need to tell everyone that everyone is responsible for this. Being young, being old, everyone must take it as her own responsibility to make sure that there is gender equality. Not forgetting men. We cannot have this gender equality and equity without the participation of men. We need to understand this because they have put much effort in women, teaching them about their rights, teaching them about what to do, but they have left the men behind. And this one cannot work. We need to have men on board. The world or the culture told men that they are high. And they told women that for you are supposed to be down. Now, to raise a woman up and bring the man to meet in the middle is not something easy. So let's fight for that. The young ones, the youth who are here, you are the role models. Just speak out, create awareness of everyone being equal and include everyone. No one should be left behind. So I think that's what I can say. Thank you.
Oh, that's brilliant. So I think we have a sort of question and comment.
Yes. Madame Céline Cotalorda de l'interministériel déléguée interministérielle pour les droits des femmes au gouvernement de Monaco. Merci d'être avec nous. Vous avez une question. Vous la posez en français, je vais la traduire comme vous voulez ou en anglais, comme vous voulez.
Je vais la poser en français. Écoutez, merci beaucoup pour vos interventions et votre partage. C'est passionnant. Moi, je me posais une question en vous écoutant tous. Comment est-ce qu'on pourrait aller encore plus loin, c'est-à-dire qu'il y a déjà des actions qui sont entreprises pour favoriser la pratique sportive par les femmes. Comment est-ce qu'on pourrait aller encore plus loin aujourd'hui pour inciter les jeunes filles, les femmes à pratiquer encore plus de sport, et notamment des sports où elles sont un peu moins représentées, des sports typiquement masculins. Voilà, c'est un petit peu ma question. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire de plus?
I'll translate. Jennifer, how could we go a bit further and to bring these women, these ladies, these girls to practice sports that are mainly practiced by men? How is it possible to motivate them or to bring them to practice?
I mean, this might be a great question for you. You chose football as your starting point. Yeah.
As you all know, that it is believed that football is a man's game. But things have turned out that also women can do football. What does it inquire? It is just inquire to mobilize these young girls and tell them that they have a right to do any sport that they want. If they can play football, also, if men can play football, also girls can play football. And we do follow the world. We have the Women's World Cup. We have women coaches. And like in Rwanda, we now have a woman who have officiated the World Cup now in Qatar. So that is a role model that can show that young girls also can have the right to participate in football. Thank you.
Anyone else want to?
Well, I think we faced some outdated preconceived beliefs in sport. For instance, in Portugal, we have some kind of thoughts that gender stereotypes, like we have this sport is for boys, like football, for instance, and this sport is for girls. But nowadays, all the sport federations are putting in their strategies the participation of women, of girls, because it's one of the best way to grow up. And all the support programs that we have, the Portuguese Institute of Sport, we have for the sport organizations, have some criteria, and we majorate the financing support for all the projects, for all the initiatives that includes girls or women in that project. For instance, we have the program of Sports for All, and in 2021 we had support about 450,000 projects, and 51% of the participants, that were about almost 500 participations, yes. 51% was female. But the main problem, in our view, is to doing something to the leadership positions and to get women in that positions, because this is the change, this is the balance we need in society. And we are now trying to have some legislation and some kind of initiatives that bring women to leadership positions.
I think I can also, I'll step out of my moderator role and try and answer the question as well. So I work for UK Sport, that's sort of my day job, and we invest in major events. And I think there was an assumption that you couldn't sell out big stadiums for women's sporting events years ago. And then we sold out Wembley for the Women's Euros finals. And just last week I was in New Zealand for the International Working Group on Women in Sport. And just before that was the Rugby World Cup, the Women's Rugby World Cup, final between New Zealand and England. And it was the first time they ever sold tickets for a women's rugby, professional women's rugby match.
Times are changing.
And they sold out Eden Park, the main stadium in Auckland. So I think some of it, too, is we just have to stop making assumptions about what the public wants. When you market and you invest in women's sport, people turn up, they get excited, that inspires young people to play, and it creates this momentum around sport and also society. So I'd say that would be my answer to that one. Yeah, go ahead.
I think also we need to put much effort in policies. For example, if there is a men's team in any town, please force them to have also women's team. That one will quicken the changes. Yeah, that one will be a very good advice, because men's team are always cheered up. So once they put women's team, then this will motivate also the young ones to support in the teams. Also, we need to motivate journalists, because the journalists, they only, talk about women's sports. They never come to support women's sports. So we need to have an increment of young girls as journalists of sports, so that they may speak out, they may cheer up women's sports, you know, and this one will come up and will have a very good result. Thank you.
Yeah, so all of you young people in the back there you go. Hopefully we've got a few young journalists there. So I know we don't have a lot of time left.
Yes, you can, for a conclusion, but
Yeah.
don't worry. Yeah.
All right, so I think I just want to ask one last question for each of you, which was, if you were to leave this audience with one call to action, one thought about something they should go out there and do, what would that one call to action be? So I'll start with you, Shema.
First, I'd like to answer the question. So in SFA, we always say, give the option, give the opportunity, and let them be. So for example, I would say one of the examples that impressed me were the CrossFit competitions in Saudi. So in 2019, we started with 30 participants. Last year, we had more than 300. So CrossFit is a male-dominated sport in Saudi. So to have that many participants for us was extraordinary. And all what we did is just give them the option. And regarding your question, I would say you can support women's sports not only by participating, just being a spectator. Like you said before, we can't expect governments or corporates to sponsor any women sports if the seats are empty in the stadium. So we always say, if you don't want to participate, just support, just go spectate. And that is a huge contribution that you can do to female sports.
That's great. Vitor?
Well, I should say that for the Portuguese government, the gender equity is now a priority on the sports policy. And we create, the Portuguese government create a group, and we will be a national action plan for the gender equality. But in the middle time, we have some examples that the implementation of training and mentoring program that we call New Leaders Sport Leadership, that is being developed by the Portuguese National Olympic Committee. The creation of we call Equal Sport Award for sport organizations that better promote gender equity, organization and training and awareness raising sessions in school contexts for through the non-formal education. So there are some examples that we can do to improve participation of the women in sport.
That's great. And do you want to finish this off, Felicite?
Just a call for action is just now to encourage the youth to leverage sports, especially in technology, because they're the future leaders. Once they grow up knowing that everyone is equal, then things are going to change in the world. So I call upon the youth, and everyone must feel that he or she is responsible for making this happen. If we all hold hands each other and say that we should not leave anyone behind, things will come up very fast, and people will be excited about that. Thank you.
That's
Merci.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer. Stay there. Stay there. We have a word from Joël Bouzou, the president and founder of Peace and Sport, just to summarize what we heard. It was, ça a déjà été quelque chose d'assez fort, ce qu'on a entendu ce matin. D'ailleurs, les deux tables rondes sont liées aussi, hein, Joël.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very happy to see how precise the knowledge becomes about peace at large and sport. And the thing I would like to say is sometimes people speak about the values of sport. Which values? It's very different when we talk about equity, and we can do what we can do with equity. If we talk about solidarity, or if we talk about respect, every kind of value has a different application. And sometimes also people speak about the social impact of sport. But what kind? And what Lane said in the morning, he spoke about, and he said sport matters. If sport matters for something, that means we have a direction on which we can work. And that's always a kind of peaceful sport approach. And but if we can demonstrate the impact, and we need to have the tools for that, every time we can demonstrate the impact, we can convince government that they can invest, or private sector that they can invest in sport. So that's also very important, so that at the end, and that's one of the mottos of Peace and Sport, we can be part of what matters. Thank you.
Merci, merci Joël. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists. We'll make a picture, so if you can be together. On va faire une photo pour les remercier, voilà, avec nos photographes. Autour de Jennifer, around Jennifer. We'll be... Great. Under your applause, sous vos applaudissements encore pour cette table ronde extrêmement intéressante. Merci. Thank you very much for testimonies and witness. Was very, very, very interesting. Thank you very much. And if you can help Jennifer to fall, not to fall, yes, thank you.